For decades, Neil Diamond was more than just a singer. His voice filled stadiums, his songs became part of people's lives, and his performances felt personal no matter how big the crowd was. He wasn't just performing music, he was connecting with millions. So when the news came out that he was stepping away from touring, it didn't feel real. Fans didn't just hear it, they felt it. There was no long goodbye tour, no dramatic farewell moment, just a sudden announcement that something had changed. Something serious enough to make a man who had spent his entire life on stage decide to stop. At first, people were confused. Why now? Why him? What could possibly make someone like Neil Diamond walk away from the one thing he loved the most? The answer wasn't simple. And it wasn't what most people expected. Because behind the music, behind the fame, behind that powerful voice, there was a quiet struggle building for years. A reality he hadn't fully shared with the world, until he had no choice. To understand why he stepped away, you have to go all the way back. Back to where it started. Back to a kid growing up in Brooklyn, with no idea that one day, his voice would reach across the world. Neil Diamond didn't grow up surrounded by fame or music industry connections. He grew up in Brooklyn, in a regular neighborhood, in a regular family. Life wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy either. His parents were hardworking, trying to make ends meet. Like many families at the time, they faced their own struggles. Financial stress, long work hours, and the constant pressure of getting by. There wasn't much room for dreaming big, but somehow Neil did. As a kid, he was quiet. Not the kind of kid who demanded attention. Not the kind who stood out right away. He kept to himself a lot, observing the world around him. But something changed when music entered his life. It wasn't instant. It didn't come with a big moment or a sudden realization. It started small. Hearing songs, listening closely, paying attention to lyrics. Music became something personal to him, something he could feel. Then came the guitar. When he first got his hands on one, everything shifted. It wasn't just about listening anymore. Now he could create. Now he could express things he didn't always know how to say out loud. He started writing songs as a teenager. Simple at first, honest, real. He didn't have a formula. He just wrote what he felt. There was no guarantee this would lead anywhere. No one around him was saying, "You're going to be a star." If anything, the expectation was the opposite. Get a stable job. Build a secure life. Don't take risks. But Neil kept going. Even back then, there was something driving him. Not fame, not money, just the need to make music. Still, reality was always close behind. As he got older, the question became harder to ignore. Was music really going to be his life? Or just something he had to leave behind? After finishing high school, Neil took what seemed like the safer path. He enrolled at New York University. On paper it made sense. College degree meant stability, a future you could count on. But deep down, something didn't feel right. He was close to finishing, just a short time away from graduating. Most people would have pushed through, gotten the diploma, and figured things out later. Neil didn't. He made a decision that shocked the people around him. He dropped out. Not because he had a clear plan. Not because success was waiting for him. He just knew that if he didn't try music now, he might never try it at all. And that choice came with consequences. The early days were rough. There's no other way to say it. He wasn't performing in big venues. He wasn't making real money. He was barely getting by. He took small jobs just to survive. Writing songs for publishing companies. Sitting in rooms for hours, trying to come up with lyrics that someone else might want to record. Sometimes they said yes. Most of the time, they didn't. Rejection became normal. But something interesting started to happen. Even though he wasn't famous, even though his name wasn't known, his songwriting started getting attention. Other artists began recording his songs. Quietly, behind the scenes, he was building something. Still, it wasn't enough to feel secure. There were moments where quitting probably felt easier. Moments where going back to a normal life made more sense. But he didn't stop. Because by then, music wasn't just a dream anymore. It was the only path he could see. And even though he didn't know it yet, everything was about to change. By the early 1960s, Neil Diamond was still far from being a household name. He wasn't on magazine covers. He wasn't selling out shows. Most people had never even heard of him. But inside small offices in New York, things were starting to shift. He was working as a songwriter, getting paid small amounts to write songs for publishing companies. It wasn't glamorous work. Most days were repetitive. Sit down, write something, hope someone liked it. If they didn't, start again. But Neil had something different. His songs weren't just catchy, they felt personal. Even when he was writing for other artists, there was emotion in his words that began to stand out. One of the biggest early moments came when he wrote "I'm a Believer," which was recorded by the Monkees. The song became a massive hit. Almost overnight, people in the industry started paying attention. But here's the thing, his name still wasn't the one in the spotlight. He was the guy behind the song, and for a while that could have been enough. Songwriting paid the bills. It gave him a place in the industry. It was stable compared to where he had been. But Neil didn't want to stay behind the scenes. He wanted to be the one on stage. That shift, from songwriter to performer, wasn't easy. When he first started recording his own music, the response was mixed. Some songs did okay. Others didn't go anywhere. There was no instant breakthrough. No overnight success. And performing live? That was a whole different challenge. Neil wasn't naturally a showman at first. He had to grow into it. Standing in front of an audience, trying to connect, trying to hold their attention, it didn't come automatically. But he kept pushing. Song by song, performance by performance, he started finding his identity. His voice, deep, emotional, unmistakable, began to stand out. His style wasn't flashy. It was honest, direct, real. Then came songs like "Solitary Man" and "Cherry, Cherry." They didn't just chart, they introduced people to who he was. Now, for the first time, audiences weren't just hearing his music. They were hearing him. The transition was happening. He was no longer just writing hits for others. He was becoming the artist people came to see. And once that door opened, it didn't close again. By the late 1960s and into the 1970s, everything changed for Neil Diamond. This wasn't a slow climb anymore. This was a surge. The songs got bigger. The crowds got larger. The expectations got higher. And somehow, Neil kept meeting them. Tracks like "Sweet Caroline," "Cracklin' Rosie," and "Song Sung Blue" didn't just perform well, they became part of everyday life. These weren't songs people listened to once and forgot. They stuck. They became memories. "Sweet Caroline," in particular, took on a life of its own. It wasn't just a hit, it became something people sang together. At concerts, at events. Even years later, it would still bring people to their feet. And live performances, that's where Neil truly transformed. He wasn't the quiet, unsure performer from his early days anymore. On stage, he was confident, engaging, fully in control. He learned how to connect with thousands of people at once, while still making it feel personal. That became his signature. No matter how big the venue, it felt like he was singing directly to you. The tours became massive. Sold-out arenas, bright lights, endless travel. From city to city, night after night, he delivered the same level of energy, the same emotional connection. It didn't matter how tired he was. When he stepped on stage, he gave everything. But that kind of life comes with a cost. At the time, it didn't always show. From the outside, it looked like success, fame, achievement. But behind the scenes, the pace was intense. There were long flights, constant rehearsals, little rest. Personal life started taking a back seat. Relationships became harder to maintain. There was always another show, another audience waiting. Still, Neil kept going, because this was what he had worked for. This was the dream. And for a while, it felt like it would never slow down. But no matter how strong the momentum is, no matter how big the success becomes, there's always a limit. And eventually, the pressure starts to catch up. By the time Neil Diamond reached the peak of his fame, his life looked almost unreal from the outside. Sold-out arenas, fans singing every word, standing ovations night after night. But behind all of that, there was a different reality, one that most people never saw. Touring wasn't just exciting, it was exhausting. It meant constantly moving. One city today, another tomorrow. Long flights, late nights, early sound checks. There was barely any time to rest, let alone recover. And this wasn't for a few weeks, it went on for months at a time. At first, he pushed through it. Adrenaline helped. The energy of the crowd helped. Being on stage made everything else fade away, even if it was just for a couple of hours. But once the show ended, reality came back. There were quiet hotel rooms, long stretches of isolation, a kind of loneliness that doesn't make sense to people on the outside. You can be surrounded by thousands of fans and still feel completely alone when the lights go out. And then there was the pressure, not just to perform but to be perfect. Every show had to live up to expectations. Fans weren't coming to see an average performance. They were coming to see Neil Diamond. The voice, the emotion, the connection. There was no room for an off night. Over time, that kind of pressure builds. It doesn't explode all at once. It grows slowly, quietly. There were also personal struggles happening at the same time. Relationships became harder to maintain. Being constantly on the road meant missing out on normal life. Family time, simple routines, stability. Fame gave him everything he had worked for. But it also took things away. And while the world saw confidence on stage, there were moments off stage where things felt uncertain, where the pace of life started to feel overwhelming. Still, he didn't stop, because stopping wasn't an option. Not yet. The machine kept moving, and he was at the center of it. But something had already started to change inside him. As the years went on, the music industry began to change. Styles shifted. New artists came in. Sounds evolved. For many performers, this is where things start to fade. But Neil Diamond didn't disappear. He adapted. That didn't mean it was easy. There were periods where his music didn't hit the same way it used to. Albums that didn't perform as well. Critics who questioned whether his time had passed. Audiences that were starting to look in new directions. For someone who had once been at the very top, that kind of shift can be hard to accept. But Neil approached it differently. He didn't try to chase every trend. He didn't completely change who he was just to stay relevant. Instead, he focused on what he knew best, writing honest songs and performing them with real emotion. That became his anchor. And then, something interesting happened. He found ways to connect with new audiences without losing the old ones. His live shows remained powerful. In some ways, they became even stronger. Because now, there was history behind every song. Decades of experience. A deeper connection to the music. People weren't just coming to hear hits anymore. They were coming to relive moments from their own lives. At the same time, he explored new creative paths. Different sounds. Collaborations. Projects that allowed him to grow without abandoning his identity. This ability to evolve, without losing himself, is what kept him going when many others faded out. But even with that resilience, time doesn't stand still. The body changes. Energy shifts. And no matter how strong your passion is, there comes a point where pushing forward starts to feel different than it used to. For Neil, that moment didn't come with a warning sign. It came quietly. And when it arrived, it changed everything. For most of his life, Neil Diamond relied on something he rarely had to think about. His body doing exactly what he needed it to do. When he stepped on stage, everything worked. His voice carried across arenas. His timing was sharp. His presence was steady. Decades of performing had built a kind of rhythm inside him that felt automatic. But slowly, something started to feel different. At first, it was easy to ignore. A slight stiffness. A bit of fatigue that didn't go away as quickly as it used to. Small changes that could be explained away by age, by travel, by the constant demand of performing night after night. Nothing alarming. Nothing obvious. But over time, those small things became harder to dismiss. There were moments where his body didn't respond the way he expected. Subtle at first. Something only he would notice. A hesitation. A lack of control in movements that used to feel natural. He didn't rush to conclusions. Like many people, he hoped it was temporary. Something that would pass. Something that didn't need to be taken too seriously. But it didn't go away. Eventually, he went to see doctors. Tests were done. Evaluations. Quiet conversations in medical offices that felt far removed from the world he knew. And then came the answer. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. It wasn't the kind of news you process right away. Parkinson's doesn't arrive with a single dramatic moment. It's a progressive condition. Changes things gradually, but permanently. It affects movement, coordination, control. For someone whose life depended on performing, it wasn't just a health issue. It was personal. It was professional. It was everything. At first, he kept it private. He continued performing, continued touring, continued showing up for audiences the way he always had. From the outside, nothing seemed different. But inside, he knew. Every performance required more effort, more focus, more energy just to maintain what used to come naturally. Things that once felt effortless now required attention. There's a kind of mental weight that comes with that. Not just dealing with the condition itself, but carrying the knowledge of what it means long-term. Knowing that it doesn't reverse. Knowing that it changes how your body works over time. Still, he wasn't ready to stop. Music had been his life for so long that walking away didn't feel like a real option. Not yet. So he kept going. He went on tour again. He stood in front of crowds. He sang the songs people came to hear. And for those moments, things still felt like they always had. But behind the scenes, the reality was catching up. There were days when the symptoms were more noticeable. Days when performing required pushing through physical discomfort. Days when he had to focus more on control than expression. And eventually, it reached a point where continuing the way he always had wasn't sustainable. The decision he had been avoiding was getting closer. And this time, it wasn't about career choices. It was about facing something he couldn't control. When Neil Diamond finally made the decision, it wasn't sudden. It may have felt sudden to fans, but for him, it had been building for a long time. Every performance had become a calculation. Can I do this tonight? Will my body cooperate? Will I be able to give the audience what they came for? For someone who built his entire career on consistency and connection, those questions mattered, because it was never just about showing up. It was about delivering something real. There came a point where he had to be honest with himself. He could probably continue performing for a while longer, push through the symptoms, adjust, compensate, but it wouldn't be the same. And more importantly, it wouldn't feel right. That realization is what led to the announcement. In 2018, he officially revealed that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and that he would be retiring from touring. The reaction was immediate. Fans around the world were shocked, not just because of the decision, but because of the reason behind it. For many, it was the first time they were hearing about his condition. There was an emotional response that spread quickly. Messages, tributes, memories shared by people who had grown up with his music. But for Neil, the moment was quieter. It wasn't about headlines or reactions. It was about acceptance. Walking away from touring didn't mean he stopped loving music. It didn't mean he stopped being an artist. But it did mean letting go of something that had defined his life for decades. And that's not easy. Performing live wasn't just part of his career. It was part of who he was. The connection with audiences, the energy of the stage, the feeling of thousands of people singing along, that doesn't just disappear. There's a sense of loss that comes with stepping away from that. At the same time, there was also clarity. For the first time in years, he didn't have to plan the next tour. He didn't have to push his body beyond its limits. He didn't have to meet the constant demands of a life on the road. He could slow down, focus on his health, spend time in a way that wasn't controlled by schedules and performances. And interestingly, he didn't completely disappear from music. He continued writing, continued creating, just in a different way. More private, more controlled, on his own terms. When he spoke publicly about his decision, there was no dramatic tone, no sense of regret in the way people might expect. It was straightforward. This is what's happening. This is why I'm stepping away. There was honesty in that. And that honesty is what made the moment so powerful. Because the real reason he stopped singing wasn't about losing passion. It wasn't about fading relevance. It was about facing a reality he couldn't ignore, and choosing to handle it with dignity. And for fans, that made the goodbye feel different. Not like an ending driven by failure, but like a decision made with clarity. A quiet, difficult choice that changed everything. After stepping away from touring, Neil Diamond didn't disappear the way some people expected. He wasn't on stage anymore, but he also wasn't gone. For the first time in decades, his life slowed down. No packed schedules. No constant travel. No pressure to perform night after night. That kind of change can feel strange, especially for someone who had spent so many years living at full speed. At first, there was an adjustment. Silence where there used to be noise. Stillness where there used to be movement. But over time, that slower pace started to bring something different. Space to reflect. Neil began speaking more openly about his life, his career, and his diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. Not in a dramatic way. Not to create headlines. Just honestly. He talked about what it felt like to realize something was changing in his body. How difficult it was to accept that he couldn't do things the way he used to. How the decision to stop touring wasn't easy, but necessary. There was no attempt to hide the reality. And that honesty connected with people in a different way. Fans who had followed him for years weren't just listening to his music anymore. They were listening to his story. A story that had shifted from success and fame to something more personal. Something more real. Even after stepping away from the stage, he didn't stop being creative. Music was still part of his life. He continued writing songs, sometimes recording, sometimes just creating for himself. The difference was, now there was no pressure attached to it. No deadlines. No expectations. Just the process. And in some ways, that brought him back to where he started. Back to being that kid in Brooklyn with a guitar, writing songs because he felt something, not because he had to. He also stayed connected to his fans. Not through massive concerts, but through smaller appearances, messages, and moments that felt more personal. Every time he showed up, even briefly, it meant something. Because people knew it wasn't easy. There were occasional surprises too. In 2020, he made a rare public appearance, singing Sweet Caroline during a difficult time in the world. It wasn't a full concert. It wasn't a big production. It was simple, but it reminded everyone of what his voice still meant. Even in a quieter life, even without touring, his presence hadn't faded. If anything, it had become more meaningful. Because now, every moment carried more weight. Every word mattered more. And looking back on his journey, it wasn't just about the success anymore. It was about everything it took to get there, and everything it took to step away. Ending a different kind of goodbye. For most artists, the idea of goodbye comes with a final show. A last performance. One big moment where everything comes to a close. But for Neil Diamond, it didn't happen that way. There was no single night that marked the end. No perfect final curtain call. Instead, it was a gradual shift. A quiet decision shaped by something he couldn't control. And that's what made it feel different. Because the truth behind why he stopped singing wasn't what people expected. It wasn't about losing interest. It wasn't about stepping away by choice in the usual sense. It was about facing reality. About understanding that his body was changing because of Parkinson's disease, and choosing to step back before it took away the ability to perform the way he believed it should be done. There's something honest in that kind of decision. He didn't wait until he couldn't go on at all. He made the choice while he still had control over how his story would be told. And even though the stage went quiet, his music didn't. Songs like Sweet Caroline still play. People still sing along. New generations still discover his voice without knowing the full story behind it. That's the kind of legacy that doesn't fade. It continues. In memories. In moments. In the way a song can instantly take someone back to a specific time in their life. And maybe that's the real reason this story matters. Not because he stopped singing, but because of how and why he did. So, what do you think about the decision he made? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. We bring you real stories behind the biggest stars. Stories that go beyond the spotlight. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.